I'm Thorne Donnelly from Liberty Books in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida.
I'm Lynn Thompson with Henry Bemis Books in Charlotte.
And this is the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, streamed live every Saturday on our new broadcast platform, BeLive TV. After 21 programs in Series 2, we've moved on to our third incarnation today, and our karma is even better. Today, it's a joy and an honor to welcome back to the cafe Owen Felix O'Neill, the owner of Felix Rare Books in very Tipperary, Ireland, a book hunting wizard who conjures immensely rare books from cupboards just by knocking on the castle door. He has seen, and the things that we see here on his shelves today are wonders without ceasing. Today's his first visit to us since September 29th, 2015. That was in our first incarnation on Blab.im. Owen, welcome back to the Rare Book Cafe. It's always a pleasure to see you.
You can call me Felix. Thank you very much.
That's what I thought.
I'm very welcome back. I've been quite ill, and I apologize. I haven't been in touch, but health came first. And but now I'm on the mend, and I'm delighted to be back. I'm delighted to be back among my books, and of course with new friends and old friends, etc., etc. I'm very pleased.
Well, what have you been finding, Felix? What's new? I mean, I have to say this for the audience first. The first time Felix was on our program, he told us how he goes about book hunting, and anytime I've ever told the story, it has elicited wondrous responses. Tell us what you do. How do you just go out into the castle? Hi, I'm Felix. I want to buy books and paper. It's all yours.
Well, it's amazing. I had a number of projects, but illness has laid me low for a while. But now that I'm on the mend, I have found a couple of American early travel books. One, for example, is the James Stewart books, 2 volumes, 3 years in North America, which I picked up for next to nothing, which I was delighted to pick up, including wonderful maps and stuff in it. Was published in 1833 in Edinburgh, and it's Stewart's travels in North America, and which of course is early travel American books are, as you know, very, very, very collectible and exceptionally rare in the original covers, which is very important with a paste on paper.
Can you show that slowly for the camera?
Quite lovely.
Yeah,
let's see what the front board looks like. Huh.
It's in 2 volumes, which is really quite exciting. The other volumes here.
Was it complete? All plates and maps?
All complete. This is the treasures that people here in Ireland for the auctions don't understand that I'm privileged to pick up. And
I'm leaving my headset on the desk and moving to Ireland. See you guys. I give up.
and as you know, the important thing is the book is any early traveling books of North America or South America are very collectible. I also picked up a 6-volume set of the rarest set of books and travels. So if you hold on a second, I'll get to you. And I had to rebind them because they had no covers. But I think you'll be very pleased with the binding. So just 1 second now.
Sure, yeah. Well, this is like what, Book of the Month Club to him? Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen who are viewing this show, book hunting in southern Florida, it's just not the same. It's just amazing what he finds.
These are the 6 volumes, and I had to bind these because they had no covers. And I've done them in old vellum, old deed vellum. I have bounded them. But what's important about these are from 1801, and including the Finding Missouri and the original map of Missouri, the state of Missouri, and the Mississippi rivers, which are of course exceptionally rare, including great color plates of Brazil, etc., etc. So the whole volume set is this. This is 3 volumes of it.
Who did the rebinding, Felix?
I did. I'm a binder, and it's called New Voyages and Travels, and they were originally done from 1800 with wonderful maps of America, which are exceptionally rare because they're the interior of America rather than the bigger cities of New York or Boston. For example, the map in Missouri goes back to 1777. So any early map, as you know, is in the interior of the United States is exceptionally rare. I think your great man that done that was Clark, wasn't it? What's that great traveler down in
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark. So I have a couple of them. But to get also Brazil and South America, including in the volumes, no complete set of 6 has ever appeared in the auction records. None. They're generally sold individually. And in each story, there are 6 stories in each, with all the maps and plans. And I was blessed that all the maps were in situ undamaged. The only thing was damaged was the covers. And because no one knew how to restore the covers, I picked them up for a song, and I restored all 6 volumes.
Excuse me, Felix.
With the both Go ahead.
I see on the upper and lower covers what appears to be handwriting.
Yes.
What is that?
I'll show you.
Actually, I'm tempted to run out and get my copy of the Lewis and Clark book by Goss.
When I travel around to old castles or old vicars or something, I buy also old deeds. These are old deeds on vellum of
okay.
1800 or 1700. And normally people don't know what to do with them. They're old wills and old deals. But it's on vellum, which is very fine skin.
Yes.
And I buy these, and I've loads of them here in the house. But I like to do it on the binding because it's unique and different. So I designed it where all the original handwriting from 1700 is there.
Wow.
Very nice.
Yeah. So these deeds tend to be enormous. And this deed is dated, as you can see, from 1806.
Yes.
And these ones are originally from 1799, the deeds on this. So all I did was I made the covers, and then I wrapped these old deeds around it. But you have to design it on. And for example, this one is in color.
Ah, yes, beautiful.
Which is the original plan of extending the castle that I put on. In addition to that, I also put in the original 6 of the Earl plus his seal. Because at the end of every deed is the king's seal. And the seal is like this. You see that? You see the seals?
Yes, we do. Yes.
So I take the seals of the signature off, and I put it on the back of the book like that.
I got a question, because this is just one of the most amazing. Okay, the first thing that I thought when you were showing the vellum is one man's treasure is another man's binding material. So you're telling me that you find these with such frequency that you use them as binding material?
Yes. These people throw them away. People don't know what to do with them because they're old and they don't care for them. They've no interest. I buy them by the cartload. It costs me next to nothing.
I understand that. My question is this. If you walked over to the other side of the room here, I would take out a little plastic envelope and open up a vellum with seals and all of that. That if I was going to put it in a frame and price it, what would I price it at? $200, a typical indenture.
Yeah.
What would something like what you just waved with the seals? Obviously, it's not a historically important document. You know,
yes,
anything happened.
Yes, it is.
Well, why would you cut it up to use it for binding then? Is it worth more as the binding material?
Because one, it adds to the value of the collection that I have. It's there forever for the next 500 years. It's better than this. This would be dumped and burned eventually. It would be mutilated. Whereas I preserve every part of this in a series of books. So including the signature of the Lord underneath it. So I designed it. So it's much better in this format than it is in this format.
Yeah, totally understood, totally unique. My question then would be this. The document that's in your hand that's about to meet, you know, it becoming a very beautiful binding and enhance the value of a book. if it was in somebody's shop that was a normal shop down the street, what would something like that be priced at in Ireland? Like if you went into an antique store, not an important one, just worth scrapping, worth more to you.
It would depend. All the legal people before, in 1900 backwards, from 1900, 1800, 1700, had to use vellum in all the wills and deeds and land transactions instead of paper. So it was all done on vellum. The problem is there's so much of it here, people don't know what to do because no one buys like I do. So when I see them, I just buy loads at the time for 10 or 20 euro or 10 or $20, literally, and I bring them home. And I stack them. I got stacks of them here. Some I've done wonderful books with, like this, because it's preserving it as far as I'm concerned. So I've added another 500 years to this book. But the wonderful thing about these books is these are rare early travel books of 1800. And these are exceptionally rare because there's a volume of 6 that's never appeared at auction, ever. They never come together.
Wow, phenomenal! It's just interesting to see something that I won't say it's something that if you find one here and it's a vellum document that somebody in the middle of nowhere transferred land or this and that, and there's no historic importance to it, it would be put in a frame, and a fairly priced dealer would price that anywhere, dependent on the frame, from about $75 to $150 or so.
Yeah,
it's just interesting that you see them like that there, and it was amazing. You always amaze me, Felix.
I fall over these deeds when I travel around. They're just a dime a dozen. It's unbelievably, they're just here. And more so in England. Obviously, the rarer deeds I'm aware of, if they're dealing with, say, church land particularly, or something specific, then obviously I would never alter it to use as a book thing. That's a whole different story. The difference, I know the difference in what I used to bind. And these were titles to land the Duke already had. The only importance was the signature and the seal. But hey, it works better on a book. So it looks like the whole set.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Did both of those sets come out of the same house, Castle?
Yes, the 6 set here, 6-volume set came from there, yes.
It must be amazing. I mean, to my eyes, from when I'm used to walking with Thorne or Lindsay or anybody. Lindsay, come in with us if you've got a question or something for Owen. What you see on a daily, Felix, what you see on a daily, I'll email you the why I did it, but that's another story.
These
what
are
do you see on a daily basis?
From 1700, the original stamps of the king stamps, the 3 of them are here. I put them on because they were on the deed. So I steamed them off the deed and replaced them here where they should be to enhance, design the book better, as you can see.
Felix, I know the difference, but I'm curious. There's parchment and there's vellum, different animals used. Was it always vellum that was used by law in the for British documents, not the parchment? It was always vellum?
Yes, you're correct. In all law to this day in Westminster and in Parliament was always vellum, never paper. And it would be roll of vellum. So they'd have to stitch vellum on to make a complete roll. But the vellum was so fine because they wanted it to last. Paper can be eaten by rats and mice and vermin. Where vellum, if it's rolled up and can be kept for hundreds of years. I mean, there's vellum going back 500, 600, 700, more, even 1,000, 15, 2,000 years old. Yeah. Go back to the Romans, this was further than that. Whereas paper won't survive change in temperatures, change in dampness, or whatever, whereas vellum will.
Okay.
Besides that, what else? Now that you showed us the Book of the Month Club stuff you found there, what about the really good stuff?
Well, the other things I don't know whether you're aware of, but I've just, I'm very excited today because I had wonderful news. Last year, before I was ill, I was contacted by the National Geographic, and they wanted to talk about my Tyndale, and they wanted to do a program on the language, how Tyndale gave England its language. because he translated the Bible where the plowboy could read it, and this was very important. But the only person that had to complete Tyndale was me. So they approached me, and I've sent a link off to what's his name, Alan. I've sent it in. Anyway, the program came out this morning. It's a documentary on Tyndale, but they used my Bible in it. So I'm very excited about this. In addition, I've been able to, here it is, the Bible here, again on wonderful vellum, and this vellum goes back to 1500, but this is continental vellum. You can see it's much darker on the book. But they made copies of this up, and they use it in the documentary to tell the story of the importance of language, the origins of language. But Tyndale gave Shakespeare his English, and he gave to King James its English to use. The King James is 85 or 86% or 90% Tyndale. Tyndale gave them English. This is the only existing complete Tyndale in the world. But now I have the publishing rights to this, and we're reproducing it in a month, exactly the same book. And we're in with all the universities and thing, and hence the publicity from the National Geographic is priceless for me, because you can understand why. So that's very, very important. So all the Christian colleges, all the universities, who wouldn't want a Tyndale in their library? So we'll do exact copies with a similar binding to this. And if you manage to see the program on which you will on the National Geographic, the most prestige international magazine and American magazine is the National Geographic. But for them to honor me and come to me and take photographs of my thing and tell me about the project was fantastic. I didn't think it was going to happen because I've been ill, but it was nice to hear that today the program is out. It came out last night, and I'm super excited.
May I ask you a question about your when you're going to be releasing these for sale, which I assume will be sometime in the next year or so?
No, they'll be sold in a month.
Oh, okay, that's even better. Will they be printed? Will they have true vellum covers and be printed on vellum or printed on paper, or how are you going to do this?
Well, this is the problem. The problem is I'll be able to do different productions. At the moment, I'll have to do production that's a general production. Then there'll be specialist productions. They'll be limited to maybe 1,000 or 10,000. That'll be done especially on vellum of the same coloring. The book I'll make slightly bigger so people don't duplicate what I have, because I have. I own the right to it. So, but there'll be no alteration in the use of the language of English and how English evolved. And Tyndale was a master at this, and this is very important. People wanted to see unvarnished the way Tyndale had printed it. And remember, the end of the machine before Tyndale died was strangled and burnt. This was his last New Testament of the Lord Jesus Christ that he published. And he sat at the end of the printer and went through every single sheet. But as we know, that every single copy they could find when they came into England was captured and burned, and so were the people that brought it in.
Correct.
So there's only 2 other copies that are in the British Museum, but both of them are damaged. They're missing between 40 and 50 or 60 pages. Mine is complete, front to back, complete.
Felix, let me ask you a question as a publisher. You mentioned you were going to do some kind of limited edition, and if I heard you correctly, it sounded like you were going to do a limited edition within the limited edition. How do you come up with a number? What statistics do you use to assign, okay, we're going to make this limited edition like 1 of 1,000 or 1 of what? You mentioned a number. What do you think it'll be in the limited edition?
Well, that's really a commercialization. I'm not overly familiar with that. I do know from collected books that the limited edition of the Gutenberg, for example, is very collectible. And there are particular books, as you know, in collecting that are reproduced, and they command high value because they're strictly limited editions. The question I have is, I'll have control of the material. It'll boil down to the type of paper used, the type of vellum that puts on. All that is costly to produce the book, but it's getting it right will be more important than anything else, and hence make it collectible. So to make it collectible, you have to do a very small print run of it where it becomes exclusive and commands then his own money in the years go down the road. As you know, you can get a copy of the Tyndale, not the Tyndale, the Gutenberg, the 1912 one, I think, and that's one of the best ones done, was done in Berlin. And that's that goes for 25 or 30,000 or higher dollars as a reproduction of the Gutenberg, limited to 1,000 copies.
Not with yours, but I ask, especially because of what you bought at the book fair last month, Thorne. Would you ever consider, or may I suggest, if there is a way for you to find leaves from other Tyndales, if they're even out there to be had, would a leaf, like a leaf book, like they did with the Gutenberg in the 20s, would you ever contemplate doing something with a leaf specimen from some other copies? Just food for thought.
Thorne?
Well, what I have is, what Steve's referring to is I have one leaf from the second edition of the Eliot Bible, which the Iroquois Bible, the one written in Algonquin. And they have, I believe, I would have to go get it and look at, that was a set of, I think, 250. Somebody obviously in the 1930s cut up one of the Bibles. There's also the same, we have, they call them leaf books. There's a Gutenberg Bible leaf book that was, I believe, done again in the 1920s or 30s, which I believe, I've seen them go for sale, and I can't remember what they are. But a lot of people tend to frown on that. But I do know that a lot of books in general are put together, I guess it's called sophistication, when you have, like you were saying, that the two copies at the British Library, I'm assuming that they were lucky that one was missing 40 pages of the Old Testament, one missing 40 pages of the New, and somebody, obviously the British Museum wouldn't do this, would put them together to make one perfect copy. That's done fairly common. But obviously something like yours is unique in all the world. I personally tend, there's some people that do a lot in the United States who've done a lot of money. They cut up old books for the maps. That's fairly common here. And the argument for the guys that do it is, hey, the book itself would be so expensive nobody could see them. I cut them up and never ever can have a map. The people or the booksellers or whatever say, well, you're cutting up a national treasure. So I'm kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. I think you have the perfect answer. You have the real deal there. That's the whole deal. So
yeah, Steve is quite right. I do. People say to me when I make more money cutting it up, but the idea that I would.
Oh no, I never said cut that one up. Let me interject.
No, not you. I'm saying there are people have said to me, Felix, would you be better? And it's like for me, it's like it's unbelievable someone even ask it. But I am aware there is a profitable business in removing illustrations and moving maps, and it is a big problem going to an auction. When you buy a book, does it have the maps it's supposed to have, and are they original, and do they have the illustrations, and are they original? It happens here as well. But I tend to take meticulous notes when I buy something, and I tend to take my time and look at what I'm buying, and and that's very important, as you know from your own experience. It's having the maps in situ to where they belong. But Bible business is a very big business for single sheets, and it's particularly in the United States. And people will pay very handsome money for nice framed, whatever it is, a King James or whatever. And there are later, the thing about the Tyndale, people talk about Tyndale up to 1550. It's technically wrong. Tyndale finished in 1534, which is the one that I had. Subsequently, anything after that is a Coverdale Bible using Tyndale, but it's not really Tyndale per se. Tyndale was long dead. It's like the King James runs up to this day, but they're not really King James. The King James is 1611, he and she version. There's a big difference here. And incidentally, Coverdale was the man that done the first English Bible published in England. I do have a letter over there of Mr. Coverdale on my wall. Signed by Mr. Coverdale to Lord Cromwell, moaning and complaining. I have a frame on my wall. But yes, and I also have a letter by Martin Luther as well.
Those were interesting times, were they not?
Pardon?
Those were interesting times, they were not. But as what happened to Mr. Tinsdale and so many others, it was not. It was good to be the king, but maybe not good to be somebody that the king was annoyed at. Case in point, did not was that the time when most of did not Henry VIII, if I remember it, confiscate most of the British monasteries and their libraries? Wasn't that on your website? That was pretty
Yes.
much. I'm reasonably fluent with British history, but they were kind of they were grabbing everything that wasn't nailed down and kill it. Well, you tell us. You were much more of an expert than I am.
Yes. Yeah, it's true about Henry. Henry had numerous problems. There was France was the problem. They were fighting battles in France. He was running out of money. He wanted to marry not because he wanted another woman in his life. He wanted a son. He wanted someone to succeed him as a king, because women succeeding was not the norm at the time. Even though Elizabeth, his daughter, turned out to be one of the greatest queens, male or female, if you wish, that ruled England. But he desperately wanted a son. And he had a son, as you know. He had Edward VI. Incidentally, I have the original school book that Henry done on a manuscript, and this is Henry VIII, done on a manuscript. There's his thing, the Tudor Rose.
Yeah, it's Harold.
There's the Tudor Rose. There's Henry's crest in gold. There's his son's crest, Edward VI, in gold. Edward's name is there. And this was handwritten in English and French at the back, because French was the language of the English court, not English. And this is all on vellum. This is not on paper. A manuscript given to the king is done on vellum, similar to this vellum. And this is all done on vellum. And this is the school book, Rules of Kingship, that Henry gave to his son. And this book was handwritten in 1521, because it said Henry's name is in the book, but he's only Lord of Ireland. He was not King of Ireland in 1530.
Well, you have to remember that basically in the monarchy, that truly was a family business, and that's a nice thing. It's good to be the king. You pass on the country. It's kind of a nice deal. If you keep your head, you're doing okay. There's some issues with being king too, I guess.
Was that when you found that book? Did you know what you were looking at? The one you just showed with the king. Did you know the provenance of it, or did you discover the provenance of it?
I knew automatically.
This book right here.
Yes, exactly how I knew.
No, I don't mean that. Did you know it was in, like the way you described it, it was there, it was his personal book. So when you bought the book, did you buy it knowing this, or was that discovered after the fact as you were researching what you bought?
It was discovered after the fact. But Henry ordered...
thank you. Makes the story much better.
It's all about knowledge, as you know. Books is about knowledge. But just back to the story of the Tyndale Bibles. It wasn't Henry that put Tyndale to death. The arguments with the Roman Catholic Church was very powerful. Tyndale wanted the Bible to be read in his native language. He wanted a Bible in which the plowboy could read English. He didn't need a priest to see between him and God. The plowboy could come into the church, take out the relevant chapter, read his verse, put a smile on his face, and head back to the field and plow. He wanted a language, but he needed to give England an English to speak, because they didn't have English to form that he gave it. So he done two things. He gave them in English, and he gave them the Bible in English. It was huge. The man before him in the 14th century was Wycliffe. Wycliffe gave them a manuscript Bible in English, but it was a different English. It wasn't English we recognize today, but it remembers from the 14th century. So John Wycliffe was the real thing. It was Tyndale, though, that gave England, he gave Shakespeare his language. He taught Shakespeare how to read and write. And that's the magic of Tyndale.
And then look what happened to the guy. Sad.
Yes, but that's the power of the church, because they were controlled, and of course the church split because you had the Reformation. But the Reformation started, as you know, from Luther. And Luther, when he hung those theses up in the door in Worms, he was stating his case. The church was so corrupt. He said, "Enough of this. This is not Jesus Christ's way. This is not what's going on. This is a corrupt institution. You cannot sell indulgences and all this."
Indulgences, yes.
And this was as well. And Tyndale was inspired by this, but he wanted to produce an English Bible, and he did. But the man that published it in England, the first publishing was Coverdale.
Quick question for you, Felix. Would you consider Mr. Tinsdale a Protestant, or was he still in the Roman Catholic faith? What do you think was going on there?
Catholic. Protestant wasn't a word really in the sense that we recognize it today.
Okay.
He knew the corruption of the Catholic Church. Remember, as a professor at the University of Oxford, you have to be a priest. So in a sense, Tyndale was a priest. Because you cannot be a professor at university. You had to join the holy orders. That's the reality. But he said that was fine. His was dealing with corruption within his own institution. And his whole thing was, he's quite right, the Bible in our own language. And the same as you had that one film you talked about, the Eliot Bible, the importance of that was the first time a Bible done in the native language of the United States. And that's a huge thing. And how many, I think 100 copies of that were given to the British Museum at the time, who almost rejected them.
Yes, I know.
But again, that's the controversy there. But the influence of Tyndale for the King James would not have come into being without Tyndale. It would not have happened.
Felix, after you publish the book and it's down the road, what do you think you're going to do with the original copy? Where will the original copy?
I'm going to keep the original copy. I think I'm a collector, first of all. I do make a little profit on other books, but I'm honored to hold this book. But I'm only a custodian. While I own everything in the house, I'm a custodian for future generations. So it'll end up somewhere. And I have to think about this because I had a recent brush with death. Therefore, the grace of God go I. But I have to look now differently and look at things now cold-heartedly in a sense to what would become of the book, because my family don't want it. It's not my family's fault. They're not collectors. And you know what it is to collect. I'm in love with this. The wife often said, I'm more in love with my books than I am with her. She's right. There's no argument.
Yeah. Edie said that she's my love, but books are my passion. So I hear you. But I was lucky. I met her at a garage sale.
Well, better.
Well, speaking, Lindsay, welcome.
Well, thank you. And we've got a few more minutes here to go in this segment of the program, but I wanted to drop in and take a moment to remind our viewers you're watching the Rare Book Cafe streaming live on Facebook via BLive TV. We're sponsored every week by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. And today, Steve Eisenstein and Thorne Donnelly have been chatting across the Atlantic with the great Irish book dealer Felix O'Neill of Felix Rare Books in Tipperary. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you. And you know that wonderful song, A Long Way to Tipperary?
Yes, we titled this segment, Is It Still a Long Way?
Come for the Guinness. Steve.
But I think we have a few minutes left here. And one thing I was curious about, actually a couple of things. You deal in fairly high-end books as far as collectibles go. I wonder if two things. One is, do you see books in the future turning into an asset class in the way that art is now considered?
Yes.
Almost completely divorced from its content or its collectability, but purely as an investment?
Yes, of course. If you take the Tyndale, for example, I'll do far better financially to publish it, and becomes a separate asset, the fact that it's published, because if you figure X amount of units, if you wish, is how the business looks at it, that's more profitable. The profit of it for me is having the book. The extra money would allow me to buy castles and take their libraries, so I can do it legally. So I'll be even more pleased. And the next time perhaps we'll speak, I won't be able to get in the rooms with chock-a-block with books. Even Steve could come over and smile because we tried to get in the door together. In a related vein, in my previous life as a lawyer, I used to fight with the U.S. Customs Service a lot about the duties on rare automobiles. Yes.
And one of the things we noticed over the years was that the who was buying and who was selling depended on what the duties were in different countries. There was a vogue in Australia for a while, and Australian millionaires were buying them up. And then the burden shifted and Americans started. Do you think Brexit is going to affect the high-end book trade, given that the...
No, I take the view, unfortunately, I can be also very political because I'm very much involved with what goes on in your own country as to the orange man that sits in the house. But I'd stay neutral on that, not to upset or slander anybody. But talking about...
Felix meet Lindsay, Lindsay meet Felix.
I apologize in my most Irish charming way. But the Britex... Yes. Yes, indeed. I will. And the thing is this. The Britex... The consequences, Britain is no longer an empire. Britain really needs to wake up to the fact it's not an empire. It lost that in the Second World War. It really lost in the First World War. Britain still thinks it has influence and it can do this and it can do that. It can. Britain is just an island. The trading partner is the United States of Europe. That's a reality. The power engine of that is Germany. That's the reality. And as for the right wing in France, she has no chance tomorrow, none whatsoever, none. She never did, she never will, it's never going to happen. This is not America where Donald Duck can get in with an orange face and bullshit his way through it. Europe is different, it's more sophisticated. But England is now having an election to decide stuff. And Theresa May has no chance against the negotiations. A company that comes to Ireland, American company comes to Ireland, it's not trading with Britain. It's not trading with Ireland. Ireland is based to trade with Europe. There are 400 million people in Europe to do services to. There's only 60 million in England. Who's the better market?
So do you think among rare book collectors and everyone else that the market will just shift away?
No, I don't. I think there's always room for a rare book market. But I think you're quite right, you said earlier, about assets. To people with lots of money, it's about accumulating assets. Did you know in our jurisdiction and in Europe, you can go bankrupt and everything is taken off of you, but they can never touch your books. Under the bankruptcy law, doesn't matter the value of a book, they can't touch it because it's considered education. They can take your house, they can take all your cars, take all your money, take all your investments. They can't touch a book.
A loaded question, but I'm sure many of our viewers are wondering about it. If you decided to put the Tyndale itself, not the reproductions, but the book itself that you've shown us today, how would you price it?
I already have a price of $25 million. I've been offered close to that, and I've turned it down 4 times. You see,
would that make it the most? Would that make it the most expensive book ever?
No. On my website, there's Leonardo had done the sketchbooks that Bill Gates bought went 35 million. Your recent sale of the Bay Palms out of Massachusetts, 2nd edition, that was sold for 14 and prima almost $17 million. But that was from 1600 and something. It was published there. The uniqueness about the thing that's like owning a great painting by Caravaggio, for example, or Leonardo da Vinci. I can't imagine not having Tyndale in my house. I just can't imagine it. And it's not about money for me. If it was about money, I'd be poor because I'd have no books. My books are my life. My books are me. And the money, what's money? I can only sleep in one bed. You know, I mean, I can't sleep in 100 beds. It's ludicrous. I like a nice, comfortable little house like my own here, like my little stove here with turf, have a Guinness occasionally, rare old whiskey from a couple of 100 years old here, or old port over there and brandy from 200 years. That's my life. It's simple. What would I do with the rest of the money? I'd be bored to death. What do I want to yacht for? That does nothing for me. It makes me sick.
Well, I noticed.
That's amazing.
I noticed preparing for today's show when I looked at your website, Google obligingly pulled up a map view of your house, in fact. And for the first time I saw the outside and I thought, my gosh, it's the book version of Doctor Who's TARDIS. It's vastly bigger on the inside than the out.
But it is. If anyone If anyone comes to my house, they go outside and say, God's very thing. This house is huge inside. Trust me, it's big. But I made it this. I made the house this. I made everything here. I made everything here is original. There's nothing. There's no plastic in the house. I would never allow plastic here. There's not even a plastic bottle in the house.
Huh? How many rooms?
So
I have 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Obviously, the big office here, the sitting room, kitchens, a laundry room. I got a huge area out in the back that I'm extending out at the moment, and so it suits me. You know, me and the wife. It's fine. It suits us quite well. She has her space. I have all my space. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Wow.
who has more?
But you see, the thing about a big house, a lot of problems. The house has to be careful. If you collect the type of books you have, you don't want dampness. That's a killer for your books. You want a house that the temperature. This house is the first house built here. This house was built in 1812. This is the only house that was here. It was a farmhouse. The walls are 2.5 feet thick.
Wow.
You know, it's 2.5 feet. This is an old house. It's wonderful. It's secure. In the summer, it's cool here. In the winter, it's very warm in here. Then I keep the coal fire. Coal is our natural product here, not coal, turf. It's our natural product on Ireland. So I keep the fires running 6 months of the year. It's cozy. It's beautiful. It's oh, I couldn't ask for anything better. It's what heaven to me. It's what heaven should be about.
Is your property, have you ever explored your property, I ask, with a metal detector just because?
Yes. Funny enough, there's a wonderful castle here in the town that my town is called Cahir. It's spelled C-A-H-I-R. You Americans would say Cahir, C-A-H-I-R. We say care, as in care. I care for whatever. But the original castle is here, is a very important castle, which is fully formed castle here. It's going back to the 10th, 9th, 8th century. The castle was here. And they haven't, all the books are gone. I'm the only man that holds a book of the original plans of that castle, including the map of that castle from 1500. When Elizabeth, Henry's daughter, had stormed that castle, 100,000 Irish people died. I've got the original battle plans of that.
Wow. That's amazing. So when you go out on a daily basis, you find things on a daily basis, or do you, I mean, it's hard to think of you striking out, you know, but do you find books like you find on a daily basis? I mean, I still, like I said it before, I'll say it again and I'll say it 1,000 more times. What you do and how you do it by just going out in the countryside and just walking up, and do you have any, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
What, you know, is this have you ever gone to the same place twice by mistake or something?
No, never. No. Unless it's something else that attracts me, like a building or a church or a castle. I'm privileged that I can get around in the car. My bigger field is England. We're only just a short distance across water. I can be across to England in 2 hours. And I take my car and I go off for 3 or 4 weeks into the rural wilds of Wales or northern England, and I come back with great treasures. Great treasures.
I'm sure. That's amazing. It's just amazing. Let me ask you something. In a couple of minutes, we're going to do something on military history books. Do you have anything within reach that might have some embankment fortifications, trebuchet illustrations, or something like that?
I hold the commentaries and Caesars that were published in all the battle that took place with Caesar in Europe. I've got all that. It's a huge folio that size. I've got the original maps of the campaign of Napoleon in Russia in the maps that belong to a general that wrote the book, and I own all the maps, 32 maps, all beautifully done. There were battle plans between Napoleon in 1812 and the layout of each where the troops were stationed and how the battle proceeded. I have 2 volumes of that. The only copy around.
Wow.
Yeah, I have.
Anything within arms?
Yeah,
anything within arms. Anything within arm's reach?
Yes, just give me 10 seconds.
Anything within arm's reach?
While Felix is pulling things out, that's a good segue. into Steve's segment on what to look for in military books. And so we're going to continue the conversation for the next 10 minutes or so on that topic. We're glad to welcome both Ted Dunn from Torrington, Connecticut, and also Johnny Walker from Quincy, California. And now back to Felix.
These books, again, I done in vellum, as you can see. I even put the date of the book. The vellum was from 1817, and I done the binding on these. But one book, I separated all the maps, which is this one, written by one of his top generals, and inside are all the battle plans.
Wow. Well, let me do a little narration as you're showing that. Instead of starting and working my way back through time, we'll start at this time period. When we talk about what you look for in military history books, the creme de la creme of what we're looking for would undoubtedly be what you have in your hands, what Felix has in his hands right now. Those are the books that have battle plans, embankments and fortifications. They have the schematics of devices. If you didn't know what it was, that giant device that you see in the old movies hurling huge burning rocks, that's called the trebuchet. So if you have things from that time period, even if you don't have the text and you have the plates, you can walk into a house. I don't know if you're going to find these in South Miami. You might find them in southern England or up in some of the more northern states, but not down here. So obviously anything with military history, although the saying age has nothing to do with the value of a book is a true statement, in this case it absolutely does. And to bring it a little more into the realm of things that we might find at estate sales or garage sales within the continental U.S., the things you would want to look for. First of all, the most saleable things we have found, at least that I'm finding, are what they call unit histories. In World War I, World War II, a unit history is the history of a fighting group. It could be a Marine Corps group. It could be an Army group. It could be a Navy group. But basically, it's the history of that group. So that's called a unit history. If you ever see anything like that, it's very, very collectible, and some of the more easy to sell, more of the modern military history books. When you go into the Civil War, the last time I heard the figure was that there were some 100,000 or more books published about the Civil War since the Civil War. So what are the more desirable titles? Well, anything published during the Civil War is going to be collectible. What is going to be more collectible is if that book is published from the Southern standpoint, or what would be called a Southern imprint. So if you had a similar themed book, My Prisoner of War Life in Andersonville, but it was written in New York, versus a similar prison title, but it was written by a Southerner, then that would be a little more desirable. Anything that has to do with the accoutrements of war, there are things like tech manuals and field manuals. Minimalistic value, you see them all the time. Some of them are a little more desirable. A little tip, if you ever go into a house and you don't want to buy all the field manuals that start out with FM, or the other ones, the tech manuals that stand out with TM, the one that's most desirable was the one that was done during World War II on ordnance and timepieces. That, for some reason, has some collector following and value. Other things, the more specific, which is kind of true in most aspects, whether it's military history, hunting or fishing or anything like that, the more specific, the better. So you're not looking for books on general wide history ranges. Not to say they're not saleable, they're just not as saleable or desirable and collectible as some of the other things that are more mainstreamed. If you're looking at things in terms of World War II, unfortunately, the German side memorabilia goes generally for more than its counterparts in US or English versus German books. I've seen seriously interesting books published about railroads, tanks, other things like that during World War II that had tremendous collector value. There was a noted book that was done on the railroads during World War II that's very collectible, but it's written from the Nazi German side of the affair. You can go on and on and on like that in terms of what is collectible in military history. Anything about specific battles has a collectible following. Something else that's very collectible, not a high dollar value, but they are the pocketbook version. There's a name for them and it's slipping from me. Lindsay or Thorne, maybe you guys can fill this in for me. It's the pocket novels they gave to soldiers. There was a name for those. It could be anybody's famous novel, but if you saw them, they were in the soldier's edition. And do you have anything besides what you showed us, Felix, or would you like to contribute? When you look for military history, obviously you're not looking for anything earlier than 1320, older than 1320. But what do you look for, and what do you tend to see when you're hunting?
Well, for me, collecting the era, I don't really collect anything really in the 19th century. Rarely I collect out the 19th century or 20th century. I'm much further than that. The main things, if I do get a military book, and I'm fortunate to get this one, is that the maps are in good condition. The maps are all in situ, which is very, very important. So the great battles, for example, Russia is very important. Hitler never learned from the mistake that Napoleon, and that is to go into Russia the way he did. If you'd read Napoleon's what went on there, he wouldn't have bothered with that, but that's historical at the moment. But finding the maps in which the general has laid out the plans in red is vitally important from any point of view, but particularly more so from the French point of view to how they conducted the battle. They were highly organized. The weather was against them, but it's fantastic. I have books from the Civil War, prior to the Civil War, that I've come across. They got maps in them, but I always think that maps of the interior of the United States are of greater interest, rather, as I said, than the main centers like New York City or Boston. So this is vitally important. And I got slave books. I got very early slave books in which all the slaves came in off Cuba and were sold to Cuba, and then generally came in through Florida, and then from there up to Georgia. And they're exceptionally rare in their own right. They're quite graphic inside as well. But that stuff are easy to find here because no one's interested in collecting them, but are great value within the United States.
The other thing that I think you would find in nice quantity would be color plate uniform books or medals and orders books from those earlier time periods, 19th century and back. That's another thing you want to look for. Anything on uniforms, very collectible. The older insignia books have some value, but if you can find anything, let's say from the 20s and back, preferably from earlier than 1900, that is uniforms and anything with the cavalry, the horses, the carriages. I mean, I've seen some gorgeous color plate, long oblong carriage books that had the most amazing chromolithograph illustrations and detail in it. But I would imagine that's the kind of stuff you would find on a daily basis.
Well, no, not in the daily basis.
Yes, I am jealous.
Yes, Steve, just let me put it this way. Remember that there was no color printing. Maybe 1824 was really selected stuff was done in color printing. So anything that was color was hand colored. I've got books on that. Actually, I got big tomes that size and one for military stuff. But the plates are gorgeous because they're all a work of art in their own right. I got one book of fashions from 4th century up to the 15th century, and every single 200 plate is all hand painted. And the book is maybe 2 feet by a foot across, and they're exceptionally rare because an artist then had to paint, beautifully painted, the same with the military uniform, beautifully painted, but every single illustration was hand painted. They're exceptionally rare, as are children's books that are hand painted. Because color printing was a luxury, you know, was an exception to the rule to have a book done where you had multiple colors. You know, the blues, the greens, the yellow. Exceptionally rare.
Yeah, while you're talking about, I have to say that while it's an interesting book, it's far from the rarest book in the world, and I'm sure you have a copy of it. Owen Jones, The Ornament of Grammar. Yes, okay.
No, I don't have it. Well done.
Well, if I ever could find the German one over, yeah, if you ever see that book, it's a gorgeous book. You can look at the plates today, look at the same plate tomorrow, and you will see 9,000 different things. I want to thank you for being on the show, Felix. We love you. We love you. We all love you. I'm going to start a Felix Owen fan club one day. Trust me. And Edie says hello. Let me just say, Edie wants to just step into the camera and just wave hello. We all were giving up our time today because we wanted you to be the one on the program.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I'm very, very nice to see you. You're looking very well.
I've been enjoying this thoroughly.
Thank you. Thank you. As am I.
Thank you. And, I hope we will see you again. I mean, please keep us posted on whatever is going on. We will announce it to the world as soon as that you have the production done running. And I would love to see a prospectus when you put together the prospectus for the limited editions and so on. And in general, thank you. Happy book hunting. Although I wish. Well, I want to say thank you.
I was going to show you my Mr. Lincoln speech. Mr. Lincoln, the election of Mr. Lincoln in the speech. This is when he became president of the United States. And I got it in the form in which it appeared, exactly as a pamphlet. Original, no covers, but that's exactly how it came. And it's the election. And this is his speech to the United States in 1860. And that's the whole speech.
That looks very clean. Was that bleached or just very well taken care of?
I beg your pardon. This is
I'm not saying you.
No.
Blondes have more fun? I don't know.
I keep this protected in plastic at all times.
It's amazing. It's just amazing, the condition. I mean, you've got to understand why if I'm harping on it, it's because anything we find down here in Florida, it's just tough sometimes. Well, Felix, I want to say thanks.
This one is 100,000. This is when nobody wants immigrants anymore. But in 1880, the Commonwealth of Missouri wanted 100,000 immigrants wanted. This is the pamphlet.
Wow. Huh. Find amazing things. So we've got to go, Felix. Be with us again soon. It's always a pleasure.
Send me an email. I'd be happy.
It's a pleasure. Thanks. I'm glad you're feeling better. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for today. We will be back next week with more book news, talks, and amazing guests. During the week, join us for Rare Book Cafe's Facebook page, where we invite you to post, comment, question, and share with us to your friends. Share us with your friends and relations. And we love it when you like us. Our shows are archived on Rare Book Cafe's Facebook page, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair blog, and on Book Fair's YouTube channel. You can also email us questions and comments, send us photos of your book treasures, and get a seat here in our internet studio at rarebookcafe@gmail.com. The Rare Book Cafe is brought to you by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, celebrating 37 years in 2018. Until then, stick with Rare Book Cafe. Join me next week from noon to 2 on WDBFradio.com for Books on the Bookshelf. And remember, for book lovers, we are paradise. Ciao for now.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, Felix. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine. Send me your email, everybody, and I'll send you something.
It'd be a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Very nice, yes. Very nice. Okay. Is that it?
Are we off air?